Good morning to all of you. I am Luis Augusto de Castro Neves, President of the Brazil-China Business Council, CEBC, and Vice Chairman Emeritus of CEBRI, the Brazilian Center for International Relations. I also had the honor of being Ambassador of Brazil to China between 2004 and 2008. I would like to welcome all of you to today's event, Digital Technology and China's Regulatory Framework, held by CEBRI in partnership with Veirano Advogados and CEBC. That said, I now pass the floor to Marcos Ludwig, partner at Veirano Advogados, whom we appreciate to support the support to the event. Marcos Ludwig, you have the floor, please.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. Thank you very much, Ambassador Castro Neves. On behalf of our law firm, Veirano, I must say we're very pleased with this third event of a series of 4 online debates that our firm has been organizing with CEBRI this year, and this time with the valuable support of CEBC. So thank you very much, Ambassador Castro Neves. The topic today is digital technology, as the ambassador said, because we are dedicating each of the 4 events to a different focus, a different sector. And today we're really excited to have a stellar group of specialists both from China and Brazil to discuss this timely topic. I think there will be contributions that will be new, be very fresh, and a lot of food for thought for the audience today. So with that said, and thanking everyone again, I pass the floor to Ambassador Marcos Caramuru for the moderation of the event.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good evening to those who are in Asia. Let me first introduce our set of panelists. We are very proud to have them here with us today. And I'm certain that we are going to have a very interesting discussion. Cao Yu is a partner at Haiwen and Partners, working at the Beijing office. He has been extensively involved in transactions covering film and TV projects, as well as Sino-foreign co-productions. He also works with a number of corporate and financial transactions in his office. Bonnie Chan-Wu is the chairman and CEO of Complex China. She's been involved not only with her organization, with her company, but with a number of nonprofit organizations. She contributes extensively to the creative community, and she plays a leading role in some of these NGOs. She's also on the board of Ocean Park in Hong Kong, an education theme park with a commitment to conservation. Ricardo Jeromel is a partner at 3G. He's also the author of a book called The Power of China, which is a book about technology and about digital technology companies in China. He's a very experienced observer, working before in China, in the US, and now in an important fund in Brazil. Insie is an old fellow in this area of digital technology companies. He previously worked with Xiaomi in Brazil. He was part of the submarine team, and he helped a number of Brazilian digital companies and unicorns to adopt the Chinese business models. His own digital company, Baby.com, was elected as the best of the year by PEG magazine in 2011. Let's start with Cao Yu. Cao Yu, let me start with a small provocation to you. A few days ago, President Xi Jinping said that the digital economy has become a key force in restructuring the global economy, in transforming the global competitive landscape in recent years. That's what's very welcomed by the markets, because it reassured the China commitment with digital technology development. He also said that China will actively engage in international cooperation and participate in negotiations on digital-related topics. What I'm going to ask you is to use your 5 to 10 minutes to give us an idea of what's happening in the regulatory framework in China and what's new in the area of personal data protection in China. You can start.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador. It's a great pleasure to be invited to be serve on this panel. It's actually a very good question. It's extremely timely. I wanted to start by mentioning a so-called Outbound investment guide for digital economy. So the government published these guidelines in this July, setting forth key areas for the governments to focus in helping Chinese investors go abroad. So, for example, the encouraged areas including like R&D outside China, the incorporation into the global industry chain, etc. Just to give a little bit of color of the regulatory framework, it is in essence a highly regulated area in China in the economy. It's a relatively new industry. It's a relatively it's young. It's fast developing. It has comprehensive reach, and it has a lot of changes and innovations over the course. So much so that now one of the areas is already, let's say, national security and privacy, personal data protection. So, if we look at the overall framework of the regulatory efforts on infrastructure on this sector of economy in China, you can see that the features include. I'll just enumerate a few. It is a heavily permit-oriented economy, a permit-oriented sector. So, for example, if you want to provide internet content to consumers, then you need a so-called ICP permit. If you want to transmit entertainment products, if you want to transmit entertainment content over the internet, you will need a so-called online cultural product transmission permit, etc. So you will have, if you want to transmit content over the mobile phone, the mobile devices, you will need a permit for that part of the business as well. So you can see there's a lot of eligibility and permit requirements. One of the features. Then if we talk about the framework landscape, it has multiple aspects. So the permit is one of them. Then one of the features is the access for foreign investors. So the telecom value-added businesses is heavily restricted for foreign investment. Although the government has been trying to relax on the market access part. Then, if we talk about some of the latest developments, we can see the hottest topics include, say, anti-monopoly and personal data protection. Just to give a few examples on the anti-monopoly part, the government has handed down some huge fines on some of the leading digital technology companies in China just this year. For example, they're included like I think almost $3 billion fine on Alibaba for the so-called the either-or practice, which means that for the stores working with Alibaba, you won't be able to open a similar store with its competitors. Then for the Meituan, it's another major internet service provider. I think the fine was like 3.4 billion RMB, which is approximately 500 million plus US dollars. So the government also banned a proposed merger between two game streaming companies because that would give Tencent a monopoly position in the market. So that is one of the hottest areas. And then the ambassador specifically mentioned personal information protection law. That is one of the other hot areas. It is among the infrastructure, it's part of the infrastructure for digital security from a national security perspective, among others. The China, over the recent few years, published laws, personal information protection law, data security law, cyberspace security law. Those are all the corner legislations towards national security in the cyberspace area, and also on the personal information protection side. It is also a big effort to protect privacy of the individuals. So it has a lot of rules on, for example, the transmission of personal data out of China. The distinguish, say, critical information, key information, and other information. It also distinguishes between the operators. They have the so-called critical information infrastructure operators, like DD, like the BATs, and other information digital operators. So if we talk about the latest developments, we have to look at the anti-monopoly moves and the data security side. So with that, I think I've used up almost up my 10 minutes. I will pause here and give it back to the ambassador. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I think we'll have to come back to some of the topics you raised because they are very interesting. And there are a number of questions in Brazil and in many other countries about, what's the future of the developments in digital technology in view of the strict regulation that China is imposing on companies. And then I'll pass on to Bonnie and ask Bonnie, give us a little bit an idea of complex China and of your own company, and give us an idea of how you navigate through this, very specific regulations that the Chinese government is imposing on companies.
Thank you, Marcos. Thank you so much for inviting me on to this panel. It's a great pleasure to join this very knowledgeable and diverse panel that you have put together on a topic that very much a learner as well as an entrepreneur that is very happy to be sharing my own experience. So I give a bit of background of where I come from. So I'm in entertainment. So a lot of the topics that Xiaoyu just touched upon about anti-monopoly, about data protection, they do one way or the other impact my business. So I think what's interesting here with entertainment is that it has to, most of the content that is consumed in China is distributed through these very, very large social networks and streaming platforms, and they have become very big, and the infrastructure is extremely all-encompassing of every aspect of life of the consumers, and as a company that is in creating content for the audience, they are actually very useful distribution channel for distribution, but at the same time with policies that are restricting how these businesses can continue to grow their influence, and also knowing that culture is a big area where the government would be focusing a lot on to basically part of the bigger policy. We have to, as a business, I have to pay a lot of attention on where it is going and be very aligned with the policy and build the business and with some anticipation of where it is heading. So this is the backdrop of how do I come into this panel. And also I think one of the very interesting thing about international trade in my area is that with digital technology, there is kind of a breaking down of the border between countries because IP travels across the world. So like in my case, part of my work is to bring some global IPs, like a very successful, let's say an entertainment format, a TV show, or some sort of social content that have been extremely successful in the West and adapt it into the Chinese market. So the localizing the content is extremely important, but at the same time, how do you localize the content but still able to leverage the success of the original IP? That is also something that what I do will have to pay attention to how the policy is shaping the cultural, I would say, the narrative in the country. So this is where I come from. I think what's extremely interesting, especially for me, I run this company called Complex China that is very geared towards the youth population, and China has really one of the most vibrant youth population, extremely digital native and extremely forward in their lifestyle and embracing everything digital. So there are technologies, there are platforms, there are even, I would say, habits of consumption that are ubiquitous in China, but not so much elsewhere in the world, and those are the really interesting things where China is leading the way, and for IPs and entertainment companies coming into China or partnering up with China in those spaces, that there are a lot of very unique opportunities that don't exist in other places. And some of the things that we all know would be like games. So China has a lot of Chinese, a lot of the most successful game formats are invested by Chinese companies, technology companies behind it, and also there is the social live streaming, social commerce is extremely advanced in China, and that are really moving consumer goods in a huge volume every day. And so it's a very highly digitized economy. So I would think in the next few years, you mentioned in the beginning of the panel that President Xi is saying basically to the world, China is very interested in building partnerships internationally on everything digital. I think there's just it is the infrastructure, it is the size of this economy and population that is digital native that is making China really the best economy to continue to innovate in that area.
Well, a number of interesting topics too. We'll have to come back to a few of them later. Jeromel, my purpose was to ask you, how do you see the Brazilian environment and the Brazilian reality in terms of digital companies? But you're free to make any comments about the points that were raised before. You have new chances too later in the debate. Go ahead, give us an idea of how you see Brazil.
This is fantastic. Such an honor to be here. And yes, a lot of very interesting points were touched upon. So basically, when we talk about Brazil and China, we all know China became Brazil's largest trading partner in 2009 and has been ever since. What many of us may not know is that in the first quarter of this year, for all the apps, all the applications that were downloaded in Brazil, 21% of all of them were from Chinese companies. Only 12% were from Brazilian companies, and only 12% were from American companies. In everything that is bought online in Brazil, in the main marketplace, such as Magalu, B2W, Amazon in Brazil, from everything that is bought, between 20 and 25% comes from cross-border e-commerce, which has the vast majority coming from China. The two most downloaded apps in the first quarter of this year were Kwai and TikTok, both Chinese. The first unicorn in Brazil, unicorn being a private tech company that has a valuation of over $1 billion, is 99, that reached this status thanks to investments from DD. So what I'm saying here, and I just gave you guys a bunch of data, is that it's for us that work a lot with Chinese tech companies. Brazil and Latin American overall became a very hot, maybe even a priority for many firms. You know, in China, I'll try to be very concise, but this China is a world leader in technology and innovation. And this is not my opinion, it's a consensus. But if we go and follow the path of how did that came about, we see that Xi Jinping came to power in late 2012. And from all the investment in the world, from venture capital funds in startups, less than 8% came from China. 5 years later, under Xi Jinping, in 2017, more than 1/3 of all the investments in the entire world came from Chinese VCs. What I'm trying to say is that the Chinese government focused, they said, okay, we need to become leaders in innovation and in mass entrepreneurship. So we look in China, the speed of the internet. China has one of the 3 fastest internets in the world. In Brazil, the speed of our mobile internet is below the speed of the world's average. And in China, in 2018, so way before COVID, there was a new unicorn being born every 3.8 days. Like in less than 4 days, there was a new tech company that was worth $1 billion. Why does this matter? Because as these companies keep growing, they need to go abroad. They need to internationalize to keep growing. And they are not very welcome in the US. We saw what happened with ByteDance and TikTok. In India, over 150 Chinese tech companies were banned. I told you guys the most downloaded apps were Kwai and TikTok in Brazil in the first quarter of this year. Both are banned in India. So the Chinese tech companies, usually when they go abroad, they start in Southeast Asia. That is way closer geographically. There are a lot of Chinese people there. But then they look at the world and they see Brazil with over 200 million people, more than the 5th largest population in the world. And you know, that are Brazil is not an easy place, but it's way easier than a lot of other places out there. So the Chinese are here. There is a tsunami that is coming. They're coming of tech companies. But I just want to mention one thing that is very clear to me of what my colleagues said, that I even want to add. I don't know, can I say that now, Karamuro, or should I save a comment on what they said? Okay.
Go ahead.
You know, what I want to ask, what you guys said, I see all this new regulation that the Chinese government is passing, and that will impact Brazil because it impacts these global tech Chinese companies. And I saw this quote from Xi Jinping that he said, we must recognize the fundamental importance of the real economy and never deindustrialize. So I feel that China is trying to avoid some kind of deindustrialization trap. So, you know, we all know that China was the world's factory based on cheap labor some 20 years ago. And I think that China is and will remain the world's factory, but not based on cheap labor anymore, but based on supply chain, tech, efficiency. Here at 3G Radar, we invest in a company called Wilson Sons that manages ports. So in Shanghai, we visit a port that one port in Shanghai does more than all the ports in Brazil combined in containers with less than 300 people. How do they do that? With a lot of technology, a lot of long-term thinking, and a lot of drive from the government. So I am under the impression, and I want to ask the other panelists here, that these platforms that some were mentioned here, Didi, or even Tencent or Alibaba, somehow they kind of became second-class citizens in the eyes of the government. That the government seems, you see the last 5-year plan, and they seem to be pushing things like semiconductors, artificial intelligence, technology that can really help China become more self-reliant technologically. So I'm curious to hear what you guys think. I feel a lot of the best minds in Silicon Valley in China are spending their times making apps that are fun, that make us addicted to games, that it was mentioned here, social media, e-commerce. And I feel some people are thinking that, yeah, this technology is great, but what is going to take our country ahead is things that are not these platforms that I mentioned, like semiconductors and AI. So, you know, I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say about this.
That's fine. We are going to come back to these questions. I also have questions on the second round, but let's give the chance to ECA to give us an idea of how he sees the panorama, Brazil-China panorama in terms of digital technology, and whatever you can say about the Brazilian developments in this area.
Yeah, thank you, ambassadors. Thank you, CEBRI, for the invitation. It's a pleasure and an honor. And Ricardo actually already mentioned a lot of the things that we've been facing here in Brazil in the bridge of Brazil and tech market and Brazil and tech exchange and actually business. So, but just to go a little deeper in some of the aspects, I think concerning specifically about the regulations and privacy laws and what we are facing exactly in this moment. I think the impact, I think we can consider two main kinds of impacts. One is eventually the surfacing of or consolidation of what we already seen is a fragmentation of the internet. Initially was the China internet and a Western internet, but now with local regulations, probably we'll start to see even more fragmentation, not real internet, the real spirit that was created in the beginning of interconnection and a lot of exchange of information between the countries, but more local towards and adjusted to the local regulation. And I'm mentioning the regulation in this sense because actually it may even impact the business when they consider to enter in specific markets. And I remember there were some cases, probably Ricardo also got contact with them at that time. There were a few Chinese fintech companies entering Brazil, and they were based mostly on their success of the technology that developed in China and Southeast Asia, mostly because of AI, big data, and use of data to do finance products. And when they enter into Brazil and they start to enter some Western market, they realize that the regulation is very different. The access to data, to local data, is very different from what they had back in China, back in Asia. So this actually may impact their business model altogether. When in the past, when we thought about Chinese products, Chinese companies going overseas, it was basically thinking about manufactured products, hardware per se, and it was just adjustments or maybe features, colors, model. But when we think about this digital business, actually it even impacts the core of the company. And sometimes what the reality of one country may even make it impossible or harder to compete with local companies, and making that market not that interesting. And so I think Brazil has some very specifics, and not only Brazil, but Western in general, for the internationalization of the Chinese companies, tech companies especially. And when I remember when I worked with Xiaomi, when we brought the company, the products here to Brazil, basically we needed to adjust in terms of hardware, in terms of local service, local customer service, and some adjustments in the marketing pitch. But when we talk about companies, even like TikTok, like doing that, supposedly their consumer products, they need some adjustments to how the local market face this kind of content or this kind of features. And not only the users' perspective, but especially the local and the political environment. So this is, despite, I think, a good opportunity for Chinese companies going to non-US directly aligned market, still they have some need for some adjustments to make in specific markets. Okay, and on the other hand, also when we talk about the I want to take the opportunity to already bring the subject that Ricardo was mentioning, and I have this feeling when dealing with Chinese tech companies about the consumer market or apps, games, this kind of perspectives versus deep tech, AI, biotech, things like that. Maybe because in the term in the market in general, and maybe in the government and long time thinking, these are the basis and foundation for the development, not only for the market, new products, but the change of human science in general. So when we talk about biotech, AI, it's a huge change and will be the infrastructure of a lot of things that will come in the future, even 5G, deep tech like that. But when we talk about gaming apps, maybe it's just a temporary trend or things that are built to the consumers, to the final users. So they're not that maybe, let's call it novel. I don't know if it's the right way to say that. So it's just a trend, just a moment. But when we talk about 5G, AI, deep tech, biotech, it's the basis of the things. And we sometimes we have this kind of feeling when we deal with the Chinese companies that are coming as well. They say, we're just a consumer B2C company. So where we'll be here, we're here for the market, but we understand that we are just a trend. We are just for a phase, a moment. But when you deal with biotech companies, they come to change the market altogether, to change the segment, or even to make huge impact that the consumer companies, maybe they don't have this kind of even mission or mindset. So this is one point of view that maybe we can take, Ricardo, from what you mentioned here. And in the last point that I want to bring here is when we talk about these exchanges and the coming of the Chinese companies, I would like just to highlight that we are just in the initial phase. The Chinese companies, they have their product overseas all over, hardware, manufactured products, and even internet products, online products, but they're still learning to go overseas. The company itself, they are still learning to send expats overseas, how to deal with local markets, with local governments, with local partners. They're still in the early stage because online, it's easy for you just to put your app on iOS store, on Google Play Store, or whatever kind of digital distribution. But it's a totally different situation when you need to send or to set up a local team to understand the mindset, the culture of the local market, and the local team is totally different. So we always hear from China companies, how it's difficult to deal with the Brazilian local labor market, labor laws, and the opposite is the same for the Brazilian companies, how to deal with the dynamic of the Chinese market and the Chinese labor. So this is something that even when we talk about digital and digital economy, digital market, this is also true from there, okay?
Well, many topics. Well, let me start with the topics that Insie and Jeromel raised and ask questions to Cao and to Monichao. I think Insie mentioned about the possibility of regulation inhibiting new companies coming to the market. And Jeromel asked the question, are these companies becoming second-class companies vis-a-vis industrial manufacturing companies? I'll have my comments as well. When I look at that, I see, well, China has this practice of allowing the market to go ahead, allowing initiatives to pop up, and then it comes with regulation. Regulation never comes first in China. First, the market comes and establishes a reality. Then comes regulation. However, sometimes regulation comes and inhibits completely the market. That's what happened, for example, with the fintechs in China. Yeah, sometimes the regulation is so strict that the market becomes to be, very timid in new initiatives, very afraid of going ahead with new initiatives. The other comment I have is that sometimes we hear from many companies in China that, the idea that in China, you must be too big to fail, because if you are too big, the government is going to help you to succeed if you have problems. But in the digital economy, I have the feeling that China is thinking about too big to succeed. If you are too big to succeed, we have to interfere. You have to limit what you're doing. So I'll ask Cao to start and make comments about what Insie and Jeromel said, and about my own comments about Chinese procedures regarding market incentives. Go ahead.
Okay, Ambassador. Thank you. Well, I actually have a comment that I wanted to make earlier, because I wanted to say that you did serve in China, because when you opened the dialogue, you quoted President Xi. So that is ultra correct. And you start by quoting something said by the big leaders. So that's very Chinese. Well, the question is really interesting. First of all, I have to say that I do not agree that, the comment that these internet companies, the giants, have become secondary citizens because of the new regulatory initiatives, etc. I wanted to start by saying that they are already super citizens. So so much so that the government as well as the market have started to feel that there may be, monopoly that's inhibiting competition in the market. You'll have to excuse me by saying not that directly, because a lot of the big digital technology companies are our clients. So, but you'll see that I'll give you some examples. For example, statistics. 2019, the retail amounts over the internet in China amounted to 10 trillion RMB, which is about like 1.8 trillion US dollars. So they are already extremely big, extremely powerful. When Insie mentioned the new efforts to steering the economy towards like more of the real economy, you could see it as the government's efforts efforts to push these huge digital technology companies that are extremely cash rich to invest in certain other areas. That's more than, say, just to encourage them to go out of their comfort zones by selling products on the internet, consumer products, by ordering food, by fast delivery, all these kind of businesses because they are already there. They're already huge. They are encouraged by or sort of pushed by the government to look at other areas that are next growth sources. For example, Isi mentioned multiple times, like AI, biotech, that part of the economy. So in short, I have no doubt. Actually, I'm not worried at all that they will become like secondary cities. They will continue to be powerful. They'll continue to be cash rich, but they are encouraged to look elsewhere in addition to the areas that they are in now.
And do you believe that going abroad would be a strategy to escape these limitations at home or not?
Yeah, I would rather say that it's the going abroad initiatives are sort of the requirement of the internal economic logic of these companies. Because you see it, I mean, industries, there are, as Mani mentioned, China is sort of leading in the digital economy area, and these companies see opportunities overseas, see their like advantages overseas. So they wanted to sort of replicate their business models and blend them with the local culture, local economy to reproduce their economic success. So if they are more or less, pushed to upgrade or to divert their directions within China, I think it's logically very natural for them to go abroad and try to replicate their success domestically.
Okay, thank you. Bonnie, the same questions I asked to you, but there was a point that you made about localizing the content, particularly for entertainment. Digital companies is very important, isn't it? And I think it's a challenge as well, because there's a cultural gap between China and the Western countries in general. So I would like you to talk a little bit about that. Is this a big challenge or a bigger challenge than you expected? But I also would like you to address the questions that we raised before to Cao Yu.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I actually echo with Cao Yu that these internet companies, consumer tech companies that have direct access to the vast population will not become second-class citizen. In fact, they are the superpower and will continue to be superpower. I agree. I think the way maybe the news or the media or a lot of people are looking at this is because there are more restrictions, regulations being put out, but that is not just unique to China. I mean, even US, look at Facebook and all these social platforms are facing more regulatory attention. So this is a global thing. So definitely not in China alone. And also they are at a different stage of development. I feel that they are a lot more mature than maybe the deep tech or the biotech in terms of development in China. So the government giving kind of more support to these deep tech, biotech doesn't mean they are, no, it's not a mutually exclusive situation. It's not an either or situation. And these super powerful internet companies, I want to also echo again with Cao Yu's point, it makes sense for them commercially. They're extremely successful. They have the capital. They need to allocate the capital, and where the growth in China is still going fast. They are also in the position to allocate their attention, their efforts and energy into expanding outside of China, and that leads to your addressing your point about localizing content. In fact, I do work with some game companies that are invested by Chinese technology companies that are already gaining traction in Latin America, in Southeast Asia. It's very interesting with these gaming companies. They are culturally transcending the border. because it for young people, it's just a game. It's fun. There's no not a language issue. The local adaptation is less of an issue when it comes to games and when it comes to metaverse and where people all they need is a phone, right? But where I come from, entertainment is a very localized business. So when these, for example, these gaming companies trying to enter into the LATAM market, they firstly, the app is already downloaded by gamers in LATAM, and then they realize it's growing organically, and then they will have to prioritize which market in Latin America that they should look at first. And I would say Brazil is a natural choice because it's one huge market with huge youth population, and it is and you could leverage entertainment IPs like a big celebrity, a music artist, or some iconic IPs where it can have a huge influence over the vast market. So when these digital products, such as a game, is expanding outside of China, going into these consumer markets, that's where the partnership can come in, where a cross-cultural partnership can help build the business in a very different way than like a B2B business would do. And I also want to respond to a point where it says where I think Inshare raised a point about these consumer businesses. Are they going to really impact or make a change when they expand or go into a different market? I do think where I come from, I focus on the youth market. The youth market is very, the way they behave, the consumer behavior is very, very different from ours. They would go into a game and be, purchasing digital asset, purchasing a skin, purchasing a concert ticket in a virtual world. That is very hard for someone who is not digital native to understand. So they are really changing how lifestyles are perceived and how consumption is shifting from physical to digital in a very, very real way, and that it might be quite hidden from the mainstream right now, but where I am at, I see that is gaining traction really fast, and it is across the world through the digital economy. So I hope that adds a bit of color to the conversation.
That's very good. Yeah, Jerome, you can either make comments about what they said, or answer the following question that I have to you. Suppose, yes, you have a smaller number of Chinese companies going abroad and a smaller impact of Chinese digital companies in markets like ours. What is going to happen, actually? Why the fear that Chinese companies could reduce their attractiveness, or reduce to come? Is there a problem of financing? You mean investors, we prefer to invest in companies that were successful abroad, they know the results, and what happens? Or it's a question of lack of imagination or initiative here. Why do we depend so much on the Chinese model to succeed?
Fantastic. Before I answer your question, I just want to make a comment. Our colleague, she mentioned a couple times about gaming. And I know a lot of us are like, oh, I'm not interested in gaming. Why does gaming matter, these video games? Because this gaming is not a business for children. The gaming industry, there is more money being circulated, being spent by people on gaming than on movies and music combined. This is a big deal, and it impacts your day-to-day life. There is one case of a company called C. C is from Indonesia, but Tencent is one of the major shareholders. So this company owns the game Free Fire. Free Fire has dozens of millions of Brazilians that play that, right? This company also owns another company called Shopee. Shopee is a marketplace, just like Amazon, just like Via Varejo, just like Magazine Luiza, okay? Shopee, to grow in Brazil, how does it work? How do they acquire customers? A company usually would spend money on Google or Facebook to bring companies to its platform. And back in the days, they would spend money on TV and make ads and so on and so forth. But because the same company that owns this marketplace owns this gaming, people are there playing the game and they get these ads. And now all of a sudden their marketplace can grow. So I just want to bring to the audience that when we talk about gaming, you must leave aside any kind of prejudice that you may have from thinking, oh, I'm not interested. No, it matters. And you should, if you're intellectually curious, how this Chinese tech company, they use a lot of mechanisms to grow. One of them is, as long as they have, we live in this attention economy. If you give, where is your attention? The companies know how to monetize that, okay? So this is a first comment. Now, to answer your question, Ambassador, why the fear? There are many reasons. There is a lot of fear going around. But one of the key things is, you will remember that when Trump was the president, the ambassador of the United States to Brazil would say to the Brazilian press that Huawei should not be accepted in the 5G race. And he would say that is a backdoor to the Chinese government. So every information that flows through this, the Chinese government will have access. And it was crazy, but he said that publicly. There was no proof that that was a reason. Another thing, China is, even though all of us here, we spend a lot of our time dealing with China and the Chinese, the average Brazilian is very ignorant about China. What do our kids study about China in school? We study about the Greek civilization, the Roman Empire, but about Chinese, is it in our curriculum? And then there is another fear that I see among investors and people that understand a bit better, which is in Brazil right now, all of us, we live in this new digital economy where the main raw material is brains well-trained in technology, these software engineers. And Brazil has a huge shortage. So as more foreigner companies come, and if the Chinese tsunami really comes, there will not be enough software engineers for all the companies, because it's not only startups and tech companies that need, the banks, the retailers, all the big companies need this skill, and we just don't have enough people that do that. So if the best from the rest of the world do come, as we're seeing them coming stronger and stronger, that will not, the best people will work for these companies that pay better. So this is a few things, but there is a lot of fear that is irrational. To conclude, when I talk to Chinese entrepreneurs, they mention that here in Brazil, they know how to use some mechanisms to grow faster. And here is way cheaper than in other markets, also because of our currency. So they see the growth in the numbers. And in tech, many times first you grow and later you think about profits. So I think it's going to be very exciting a few years ahead of us.
But I will insist on my previous question. Do you believe that investors would feel more encouraged to invest in companies that had a successful experience abroad or not? Or they are willing also to invest in new companies, new ideas, new proposals, new avenues?
So when it comes to tech, what is happening in Brazil is unprecedented. The amount of money that funds focus solely on new companies is through the roof. The numbers are really, really spectacular and very impressive. Latin America as a whole overtook Southeast Asia and became, besides the US and China, the second largest market in the entire world in terms of capital deployed to startups. So usually these venture capital funds, they specialize on betting on new ideas. And then if it's a company that has had success abroad and will come to Brazil, they won't really do JVs with, it's not that normal. They will open their own entity and they may do a JV with a local company, but do they need local capital? Not usually, so it's rare. What I do see is that some people, they because of ignorance, they don't know, they treat China as uninvestable. They want to know the technology, they may acquire the technology, but they don't want to be on the cap table of a company that is based in Shenzhen or Hangzhou or whatever in China, because they don't understand the rules of the game. So I think the work that CEBRI does here to highlight the best of China goes a very long way, because it opens people's eyes. And now with COVID, people cannot travel there. Even though we're doing this remotely and it's working well, I think people that have never invested in China, they will want to, smell China in person before they do big moves. I hope that answered, but.
That's it. Thank you very much for the nice words about the work undertaken by CEBRI and the connection between China and Brazil. ECA, it's your turn to make comments on what they said. But I want to underline one point that you made. You made a point that there are companies that have an impact on culture, you see, on habits and all, and there are companies that have an impact on business. And you were talking about biotechnology and all that. Is this a fear? Do you identify in Brazil this kind of concern about companies that may have an impact on business and change business practices in a way that Brazilian companies will not be able to follow? But you can also make general comments about what Saul, Bonnie, and General Mel said. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I want to bring what Bonnie and Ricardo mentioned about the gaming segment. One important thing is that we can see that as what anime was, mangas was from Japan in the past, and K-pop and K-dramas is to Korea now, and games will be for China already is starting from the last few rankings of the high grossing gaming apps. You can see a lot coming from Chinese companies. Ricardo actually mentioned in the beginning of our meeting here, and not only from China, but some of the content, some of the game subjects are historical China. Just people they're not exactly aware. For example, the Three Kingdoms, it's a frequent subject. The Monkey King is a frequent subject. That just people, they're not aware that is China history. They just think maybe is an general Asian historic moment, but they're really important moments. And from children, for example, I have a kid, 9 years old. Actually, he's been learning Chinese history more from games than from from the family, because he saw a lot of things, a lot of the historical characters, historical moments. So I just wanted to point out, and this will actually be very important, I think, in the perspective that gaming will be probably one of the soft powers for China, Chinese culture in the years to come. And so just coming back to what you mentioned, the fear. I think maybe fear in the perspective of companies, local companies, that they don't understand or they don't realize that Chinese companies, maybe they have a different business culture, a business mindset, and even different strategies to compete, because first, they're competing in the biggest market in the world. So they needed to develop new things. So new ideas, new ways, new tools, new strategies. So it's necessary. The same market, probably when we talk in Brazil or in the US comparing to China, probably there you have 10 times more competitors than anywhere in the world. So you need to develop new ideas. And of course, the market, the local market is totally different. So in the recent years, and actually I'm starting to come up with the impression that we already have a different management school coming from China. You have management school from Japan, from the US, even from German in the past, but there's a new management school or business school in business concept coming from China that put together all the power of the industrialization, adding up on top technology layer. This is totally different from what we have in the past. So I think the fear or what the Western companies should be concerned in general is from this point, not only because China is the industry of the world, a huge consumer power, but this is something that's not very visible, is the way that they think, the way that they manage companies, and the strategy that they have behind. Ricardo mentioned one of the biggest case actually is impacting hugely here in Brazil, the case of Shopee. Shopee comes with a totally different strategy to compete actually in a very crowded market, which is e-commerce. There are a lot of local players, very strong ones, very traditional ones competing in this space. But then Shopee came, and in less than 3 years, they changed the landscape. And actually many local companies didn't even realize what Shopee is. They just think this is a regular e-commerce company coming from subsidizing the discounts. Actually, it's not only this, not only because they have a huge amount of capital, they're been capable of doing this, but they even have different strategies, different business models, or they can rely on the gaming side that Ricardo mentioned. So this is I think the new point that we should, the Western companies in general, the Western markets in general should be concerned is that the Chinese companies come with capital, with product, with huge internal market, but also with a different mindset to compete in any other countries. And this is something that the Southeast Asia is replicating. So this is why Shopee and Garena, actually they're from Singapore, but it's totally a Chinese playbook. So you see a lot of companies from Indonesia, from Thailand, also using the same playbook. So we should not only look at China, but the Southeast in general. They're generating a lot of companies, and in that region, they're coming to the West, coming to Brazil, competing in a different way. I just want to bring to the attention there are a few logistic companies that these e-commerce companies they're bringing along. So this is another point that is important. They usually don't come alone. So they come with the whole segment. When I mentioned fintech in the beginning, there were a few Chinese coming here, but then eventually they went to Mexico. And in Mexico, you have probably around 30 to 40 Chinese fintech companies competing in Mexico alone. And then when you talk about e-commerce, you have not only the e-commerce platform per se, only alone, but you have logistics, you have payment, you have the whole ecosystem coming. And this is why the development, and this is so actually the impact is way beyond what probably we see in the first moment, Ambassador.
Well, very good. Thank you. Luis Augusto, you want to make a comment or ask a question? Go ahead. You have no mic.
Thank you very much, Rose. Thank you. I have some concern. We are talking about digital technology and regulatory framework. But we see these days that the biggest technology companies act as sovereigns in the digital world. They create the architecture that defines the space, the algorithm to determine what happens in it, and the laws which come with the title, terms and conditions that set out who's allowed to participate and under what conditions. I find that there's today a digital world in which technology companies act as an ultimate authority, just as there is a physical world ruled by law and backed by the force of governments. The big challenge is how to reconcile these two worlds, the digital world and the real world. And I have some doubts, or I should not have, but I have, that the power of technology companies grow beyond the ability and willingness of governments to constrain their authority. So therefore, my question or my disquietness is about how to reconcile those two worlds in regulatory terms, the digital world or the physical world. That's what comes to my mind now.
Very good. Who wants to answer this question? Jeromel, you are smiling. It seems that you want to say something.
No, I am a big fan. I agree 100% with what was just said. And I think in my point of view, what happened in China was just earlier than what will happen in the rest of the world. These platforms, it's a no man's land. It's the Western world. They do whatever. We don't even know what happens inside, how they treat the data and all. And, you know, in July, in the White House issued a document, and I decided to read that document. And if you pinpoint the main points that they were saying, how the Biden administration will enhance competition in the digital era in the US. And a lot of the points are very similar with what the Chinese are doing. Here in Brazil, we have the new implementation of LGPD, and these things will take time. And I think what is happening in China also, the Chinese government said in July that they are going to spend 6 months reviewing what is happening in the tech space. So we should expect more movements happening. And I think I agree 100% with the ambassador. These things similar, maybe in different speed and magnitude and enforceability, but the way it is and has been the past 5-10 years, I don't think it will be in the next decade.
Saul, in a law firm, you deal with traditional companies and you also deal with digital technology companies. What's the difference in your view?
Well, that's a very interesting, really question. I mean, I want to go back to, what you mentioned just now. The ambassador mentioned just now about the power of the digital companies vis-a-vis the real world. I wanted to start there. Now, I think there is, I think it's easier perhaps in China for the government to put constraints on the power of the big tech companies, including the internet, the digital technology companies, given the tradition, the political tradition, etc. I think it's a matter of balance in any society when there is a voice that is particularly powerful, that's exceptionally powerful. Then you watch over it and try to balance it out. I think because I went to law school in the States, and one of the key principles that we learned at law school is that the American governments and society alike, they are extremely vigilant about one person or one, say, business becoming just too powerful. That's why they invented the anti-monopoly law, and as far as I remember, in the 1950s, the Paramount case basically deprived the studios from owning cinemas, and there have been all the basically split Bell, and then you see now AT&T and others. I think you could see that in the States, for example, the giant internet companies, they are so powerful. They have that kind of power that the giant digital technology companies in China cannot think of some of that. For example, blocking the speech of an incumbent state leader, something like that. But I think we'll see. We will see. I think that every country has its balance point So I think the respective countries will work their balance out as the industry goes along and the ramifications are better figured out. So I mean, for our, if you ask from a practitioner's perspective, the digital companies and the traditional companies are not that different. The digital there are vastly successful players in both areas. So so you wanna look at their sector. You wanna see maybe because I'm in the entertainment media sector, so I am very used to like tech companies, the informal culture, and that part. But in terms of business logics, business thinking, you could see that because you see the digital tech companies, they grow so big, so fast. There are reasons to that. They are very innovative. They are daring people in exploring new frontiers. But these elements also exist in traditional companies. So I have to say that I don't see like differences that differentiate these companies or these mindsets or mentality per se. I think it depends, and it's I would like to view it as on a case-by-case basis, and see that they follow more or less the same business and economic logics.
But having heard that, I want to ask a question to Bonnie.
Yes, please.
What are the challenges for a digital company going abroad? Because a traditional company, the challenges are the business, of course, the economic scenario that the company is going to find in another country, the exchange rate, for example, because this has to do with the remittances of profits and all. What are the challenges? What drives a digital company to go abroad? What are the elements that the digital company pays attention to, in your view?
I'm very excited about this question. Look, there are some statistics. So in 2019, for investments, overseas direct investment, ODI, in Latin America by Chinese investors, Brazil got about 890 million US dollars investment from China. It's not a lot, but the investment focuses in the TMT area, like information technology. So it's the largest sector for the Chinese overseas direct investment in Latin America. So there have been certainly lots of challenges. Actually, our respected panelists have already mentioned a number of them. As I see it, I think because when I had a job at the China Sovereign Wealth Fund a few years ago. So when I was working there, I actually wrote a paper, drafted a paper about challenges facing Chinese investors overseas. So it's there don't seem to have at the fundamental level, the challenges are more or less the same as I see them.
I see.
Right, at fundamental level.
Bonnie, do you agree with that? Which are the challenges, Bonnie, in your view, of companies going abroad?
For Chinese companies,
digital companies, not traditional companies.
Yeah, I think digital companies actually have, I would say actually less, should I say less challenges, because a lot of times the development, the infrastructure doesn't need to be replicated in well, at least the companies that we are, let's say if it's well, we use the gaming industry as an example. There is not a lot of incremental additional development that one needs to add to it when entering into a new market. The new efforts are mostly in the marketing side, sales and marketing side. So the product itself is pretty much universal. And I think the challenges would be the cultural adaptation, which is always a challenge, especially for Chinese companies going abroad. I think Chinese companies have been very busy growing their domestic market for many years, and the domestic market still has a lot of room for maintaining fast growth. So for them, a lot of the really successful companies, even expanding outside of China, it can be considered a distraction. So I think internally, even for the senior management, for the executives to see the value of investing into new markets and markets that most likely have smaller, smaller population, smaller addressable market, it is a challenge internally to get the CEO's attention to see how important this is. And also, I think another challenge that I wanted to add about culture, the Chinese culture is, I think Ricardo mentioned that the world outside are not very familiar with the Chinese culture, and it was not in the education curriculum. It's not in the pop culture, so it's very foreign to a lot of people. So when a Chinese company has to introduce their product, and where the product inevitably will have some cultural roots from China, Chinese companies might find it a little challenging or even lack confidence to really push the product as it is. But I think I often see that that could be sometimes a bit of a point of confusion for communicating a Chinese product when expanding into other markets.
Well, let me ask the last question to Yicie then. What's the impact of a company coming here in terms of the cultural clash? Because you worked with Xiaomi and you have the experience. What's the most visible impact? Yicie.
Yeah. I'm thinking here because actually there are many, but when the first one is when you send your first team to the ground to study, and usually this is something that takes a long time, even for them to find out their way in terms of bureaucracy and things, and in a day for their daily routine. So I just want to bring again the example of Xiaomi that we had. I think I mentioned a few times before. Xiaomi was a very specific case because the first team here in Brazil was actually formed by Brazilians. Even the regional manager, basically the entire team here were Brazilians. They tried the opposite format of the traditional companies that go abroad when they send a Chinese or someone local from their headquarters to specific markets. And in case of Xiaomi, they already formed from the first moment a totally local team. And actually, there were only two people that were speaking Mandarin. I was one of the case, and the other guy also was a Chinese Brazilian. So actually what happened was totally the opposite. We were disconnected culturally from the headquarters because we were a lot of Brazilians trying to work with the Chinese product, with the Chinese companies, without having a deep understanding. So I think in the end, it's all about the first thing is that will be the basis for the development of the company is that regardless of the level of the product, the price of the strategy, it all comes from the company culture adjusting and understanding the local culture. If you don't have that, and that is done through the team, right? And if you send someone that it's not entirely open to learn new cultures, it's hard for them. And this is why I don't know if it's that on purpose, is a real strategy, but I realize that most of the expats from Chinese companies, when they they go abroad. Many of them actually they're undergrad from language schools in China. They're not engineers, they're not business managers, but they're people that learned the local language. And I met many, for example, Huawei, ZTE people that were expected, were sent by the headquarters here. They were not engineers. They didn't know exactly about the product, but they were capable of speaking good Portuguese and learning very fast the local situation instead of being specialists of the company, of the product. So I think the major point and here is all about the culture and all about the initial team that will form the company performance in specific countries, Ambassador.
That's very good. Well, we have to close. Does any of you have a fundamental comment at this point? An important point that you missed and you want to come back to it? It's a question to all of you. If not, thank you very much. This was a fascinating discussion. Oh, yeah, Cao Yu.
Right, yes.
I thought you're saying goodbye. I thought it was a little bit premature to say goodbye, but go ahead. We still have a few minutes.
So raise a hand. So I just wanted I wanted to add a note on the concern and fear part that Insia elaborated. I think if we think about the fear about Chinese companies coming to Brazil and the fear about Brazilian companies entering into the Chinese market, we in China we have been there with particularly the United States. So in the early stages of the reform and open policy, the American companies came to China. Every one of them is like formidable. And the government was facing like a dilemma. If you let companies come in all at once, then they're gonna crush the indigenous industry. But if you keep them out, then they will. Then you lose the opportunity to learn and to attract foreign investment, etc. So the Chinese government worked out a way to open the market gradually, and at the same time cultivating indigenous industry. Then so much so that at this time, so a lot of the Chinese industries are very confident to let foreign investment come in and compete, at least in China, and many of them have gone out into other markets. And in terms of the outbound investment by Chinese investors, it's also like the challenges mentioned, like legal, cultural, and the lack of human resources, and at times adversity. So these are all the matters that Chinese investors have seen and have experienced. But you've got to go there. You need to find local people. You have local access, advisors, understanding about the environment, understanding of the culture, and still you start to grow outside your country's border. So I think the fear would be natural, but it certainly cannot and should not be the element to prevent efforts from either accepting Chinese investment or going into China. There are lots of opportunities here, actually. So I think just wanted to add that I think given how vast and how wise the people in Brazil are, I think there are got to be ways to strike a proper balance for the outbound and inbound investments.
Very good. Any other final comment? Well, if not, we have to close here. It is a very interesting debate. We are navigating new waters, of course, and I hope this is going to be the first of a number of webinars that we are going to organize to discuss these topics. Thank you very, very much to all of you. I enjoyed very much this discussion, and have a good day, everyone. And thank you, the audience, for being with us for this 1 hour, almost 1 hour and a half. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Now this is bye-bye.
Bye.